One of my favorite video game franchises that I probably don't give enough love to on this channel has to be Resident Evil. I remember the first time I played Resident Evil 1. I rented, yes, rented a PlayStation 1 from the local video game store, and I rented a copy of Resident Evil 1. And I was just immersed with this game. I absolutely loved the atmosphere, the way it really conveyed horror and jump scares and stuff like that. It technically wasn't the first survival horror game ever. Alone in the Dark predates it, but I feel like this was the game that put survival horror stuff on the map. I ended up getting to the Yawn, which was the giant snake. I died, and I didn't have a memory card because I didn't know I needed one with the PlayStation 1, so my save was forever gone. But the Resident Evil franchise, of course, has gone on to be extremely successful. Many numbered entries, many spin-offs and side games. Really, I can't think of a Resident Evil that I actually hate. Like, even the bad ones, like Resident Evil Survivor, I still have fun with that game. I still think it's kind of interesting. Resident Evil Gaiden, like, that's not terrible in my opinion as well. But it seems like something big is happening with Resident Evil. And in this video, I'm going to break down kind of the Occam's razor thing, the most probable thing that's happening with the Resident Evil franchise and what this actually means. But then at the end, I have a theory. And I don't know what I'm basing this theory on, but something inside of me tells me that this is what it's going to be. And if it is, I'm going to be very excited. Now, we're not necessarily talking about Resident Evil 9 stuff. I know there's been a lot of rumors about Resident Evil 9 and potential leaks, but it seemed like a lot of those have been walked back. That's kind of a shame. I'm interested in the future of the Resident Evil franchise, but we're going old school today. I told that story about Resident Evil 1 on the PlayStation for a specific reason, because we're going back into time with the Resident Evil franchise, and that to me is something that's very exciting. When you look at how you could play Resident Evil games right now, Resident Evil 2 and 3, you're playing the remakes. Resident Evil 1, you're playing an enhanced version of the GameCube version or playing the original GameCube version. It seems like for whatever reason, Capcom has kind of forgotten about these classic Resident Evil games that came out during the 32-bit era. And many people, myself included, have a lot of nostalgia for them, but more importantly, they're still awesome games. They feel very different than their modern counterparts because of things like fixed cameras and tank controls. And the fact that these games are not readily available really anywhere to buy and play is kind of a bit of a disappointment. But it seems like that might be changing. A brand new rating for the original Resident Evil from 1996 just went up in Europe on the PEGI website, basically saying that something is happening with the original Resident Evil. Now, this is for a PC listing, so many people are thinking, well, maybe this is coming to Steam. Resident Evil 1 did indeed release on Windows way back in the day, but it's not readily available to buy on Steam or anything like that because, well, obviously you needed a weird version of Windows to run it. You know, it was a product of the time. PC games are a nightmare anyways. I tried to play Assetto Corsa recently on a Windows 11 PC. I failed miserably, so I refunded my Steam purchase because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. So Resident Evil 1 to be brought back to the modern era, the original version of the game, to me, is freaking awesome because that would be a sign that Capcom is finally acknowledging these original trilogy of games. And these are games I want to play again. These are games that I would like to see available on modern platforms. Yes, they're a little bit tough to control. Yes, the tank controls take a little bit of getting used to, but those games just ooze so much character, so much charisma, so much charm that I feel is maybe a little bit lost in the more modern games. You know, some of the nuances of the original trilogy of games, you don't get those feelings anymore. Ever since, of course, Resident Evil 4 came out, everything just sort of changed for the Resident Evil franchise. So this PEGI rating has a lot of people believing that there's going to be either a re-release of the original Resident Evil or potentially a trilogy being brought to modern platforms. To me, that would make kind of the most sense. I don't really see why you would just do Resident Evil 1 and not do the other games. Like, well, a lot of these compilations that Capcom does, especially the ones that we've been seeing lately, there are multiple entries in here. And when you're talking about Resident Evil and the trilogy of games on the PlayStation 1, at least from the mainline perspective of Resident Evil games, I think this would be a very welcome addition for anyone who loves retro games. I would be all over this compilation because it would be nice to have these 3 games readily available on modern platforms. So that's what a lot of people think that this PEGI rating is kind of signifying, and this is something that Capcom could announce really at any time and just sort of release whenever they wanted to. It's obviously not a super big project or anything like that, simply porting some PlayStation 1 games onto modern platforms, and we've seen them do that time and time again. Mega Man collections, Street Fighter collections, Ace Attorney collections. Capcom is very good at these collections. So for many people, that's where this story ends. It looks like Resident Evil 1, probably by extension Resident Evil 2 and 3, will be coming to potentially modern platforms, or at least PC, as is listed in the PEGI rating. But like I said, RGT, you know, he understands Occam's razor, but he gets a little crazy. All right, he gets a little bit out there with his theories, because I have a theory. I don't necessarily think that it's just going to be something like PC. I think this is for another platform, and if this is the case, this would be cool as hell, because we wouldn't just be talking about a digital collection, we would be talking about a physical collection. So what am I talking about with this? Follow me here. There's a company in Europe that makes retro hardware and retro games, physical releases of retro games. I, of course, am talking about Evercade. Evercade has been known, and you know, they're coming up in the world. Like, we've covered Evercade products before on this channel. I genuinely enjoy them. I think they do something very unique and very cool, very budget friendly games. We had stuff like the Duke Nukem collection that was super cool. They did an Evercade versus the home console system of that. Of course, Tomb Raider's coming up. Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3, PlayStation 1 games, getting a Evercade versus skinned model for that as well. So you see where I'm going with this. I think, and I'm basing this really on absolutely nothing, although I did try to do some investigative work. I did reach out to some people, and I was told, you know, initially I asked about, you know, more 32-bit stuff, and I was told that there was the potential for more 32-bit stuff to come. And when I specified, is it Resident Evil, I was not given an answer. Take that how you will. I don't know, they're probably just asleep when I asked them that. But I think this is Resident Evil for the Evercade. And I know what you're saying. Well, RGT, that doesn't make any sense. Why would Capcom do that? Capcom is already working with the company. Look, here is a Capcom Evercade offshoot product, but it's still an Evercade product, Hyper Megatech, with Capcom games built into it. They're making those Capcom cabinets right now. If you buy the Evercade EXP, it comes preloaded with Capcom games. They have new cartridges that they are releasing, with Tomb Raider being the first one, that allow for more storage. Bro, imagine they come out with an Evercade versus skinned Resident Evil, and there's like Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 on the Evercade. Do you understand how freaking cool that would be? Do you understand how awesome that would be? And it makes perfect sense. Even if you take into account the fact that Resident Evil 2 and 3 and Resident Evil 1 DualShock Edition allowed you to use the DualShock analog stick controller, it still had D-pad controls, and for many people preferred the D-pad controls because it was a little bit more precise than the analog stick was. So yes, by default, I believe Resident Evil 3 has it to where you change your weapons with the D-pad, but they could just change that. They can just make it so you press a button, because the controller has more buttons, the handheld has more buttons that you can access in order to use and change your weapons. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this is just wishful thinking, but I feel like there's something to it. You know, when you look at it getting a European rating, and it's only a European rating, Evercade is in Europe. They only do PEGI ratings. You look at the physical products that they have. I have one right here. You look at the physical products that they have, they're PEGI rated stuff. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's just a coincidence, and it could very well be. But I think there's something more to it. I hope there's something more to it, because that would be freaking awesome. But regardless, that's some good Resident Evil news, man. I'm glad that Capcom hopefully is going to be doing something with the classic games. Like, I love the modern ones, don't get me wrong, but don't forget about the classics either. Those games are what brought you to the main stage now. Those are some timeless classics that people love to play. People love to speedrun. People have a reason to go back and play those because the remakes, they're not one-to-one versions of these games. So let me know in the comments section down below. Would you be excited if the Resident Evil trilogy ended up coming out onto modern platforms, the original 32-bit era? Do you think my Evercade theory holds weight? I don't know. Like, it makes sense to me, and I guess that's all that really matters at the end of the day. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.